Begins with the billionaire Richard telling people that he had a son and named him Richie Rich. This is Richard's loyal servant, whose name is Harper, and we learn that Richie, as soon as he was born, became the richest child in the world because of his father, who was extremely rich. And Harper was in charge of taking care of Richie and cleaning up his time, appointments, and activities for him. Richie lived a luxurious life and did whatever he wanted, while Richard spent hours. He ran his own business empire a lot, but despite that, he was wasting his time trying to spend time with his son and showing that Richie loved the sport of baseball. And when he grew up and became a teenager, he remained. He played baseball with the servants in the garden of his palace, and although Richie had everything he could wish for, he did not have any friends to play with, and besides playing and having fun, at the same time he had responsibilities at work. And we know that there was a factory called United Bank, and with 600 employees, he would not find a job, but Richard decided. He buys this factory so that the 600 employees do not lose their jobs. Everyone was waiting for Richard's plane, but the one who got off was Richie, because Richard was not empty. So I sold his son in his place, and because Richard wanted his son to take over the responsibility himself, because one day he would be his successor. And we will see that some of the children they were playing baseball close to the celebration, and they saw Richie with some of the great privileges that this boy was enjoying. They decided to start the celebration and go back to continue playing, and Richie saw them while they were playing a game, and he himself was playing with them. While he was giving his speech, he was focused on the children who were playing, and after he finished, he was greeting people. You go to the children, but the bodyguard stops Ferguson and tells him that this place is not safe for you, and you must return to the plane. Harper enters and removes his hand from Richie's and says to Richie, "We have to go." Richie agrees and gets on the plane and looks at the children. Those who are playing here, Richie realizes that there is something missing in his life, and this is a simple thing, but money cannot buy it. And then they return to Richard's palace, and we know that Richard at that time was still returning from travel. And at that time, his wife hired a sculptor to carve the mountain next to the palace, and it formed the mountain they looked like the three of them. And then Richie was worried about them in greeting his father, and Richie wanted to tell him about the children he saw, but he hangs up on a call coming from the American president. Richard leaves his son and goes to answer the president. He comes at the time of Richie's chemistry lesson, but Richie's teacher was not a teacher. It's normal that this man was a chemist, and his name was Ken. He invented a device called a molecular regulator, and it contains any kind of waste inside it. And the device does recycling in order to produce new useful things, like it produces bowling balls. And Richie is worried about him and tells him that I'm not in the mood to take a lesson today. And they ask about his inventions. Ken Pure tells him that he invented the strongest adhesive in the world. And Pure has a substance that sprays on clothes and makes clothes anti-corrosive. For dirt, stains, and anything else, it is also bulletproof. The next invention is that he invented a real bee that can be controlled remotely and can pollinate an entire field faster than 100%. A bee in Ken tells him that it is still just a prototype, but it costs millions of dollars and something is controlling it and annoying the scientists. But Harper thinks it is a real bee, so the bee passes by and Ken is shocked and tired as he runs after Richie. Then the mother, whose name is Regina, calls the sculptor who carved the mountain and asks her to do it. Edits on the mountain. At night, Richard's family receives an unexpected visit from a person named Lawrence. Lawrence remains one of Richard's partners, and at lunchtime, Richie does not want to sit with them and sits at the end of the table because he does not like Lawrence and Harry. Gina tells her son that I do not like him either, and she was forced to sit. He is with him because he is talking to her husband about work, and she asks her son to eat all his food, and my cat lies to her and eats for the dog. And Richard speaks and says that he is proud that he has never fired anyone from his companies before. And Lawrence asks him to stop the donations he makes because the donations cost the company $1 billion last year. She came in and Regina confessed to his words and told him that Richard and I agreed to help people who face difficulties in life, whether it helps with money or work, and that's why they bought the United factory that we saw a little while ago. And Lawrence tells them that you must get rid of because it won't earn you money. Richard agrees to get rid of it, but he won't sell it. He decided to give his hands free to the employees and keep them busy, and the world is worried about them and hands over to Richard his newest invention, which is a device that can detect the smell of anything. Richard calls his son to try it with him, and when Richie tries it, it turns out to be working fine. After dinner was over, Richard and Regina were taking Lawrence to his car, and Lawrence told them, "I propose to you. Provide the security system for the house." Richard stuck his tongue out and said to him, "It is not necessary because the valuable things we carry are in a safe in the family's basement." After Lawrence heard this sentence, he began to know where the safe was. The next morning, Richie's alarm clock was by burn, and Richie did not want to wake up and wanted to continue sleeping. Harper was worried about him to wake him up, and the new trainer, Claudia, arrived to train him in morning exercises, and when he saw her, he became very patient to exercise with her. The three of them exercise, and after Richie finishes, he turns on the GPS device he has connected to the satellite in order to locate his father, and the device informs Richie that his father is in the White House of the President of America. Richie decides to call him and interrupts the conversation between him and him. Between the American president and Richard, he feels embarrassed because Richie called him to tell him that I had pimples on something, and he tells him that we will talk about this topic later. And he closes with him, and then Richie goes to school and finds Apple, his classmate who is from the same class as him. And the teachers were all great doctors and scientists, but they were all... Children are not interested in studying and are not focused on the class. Who is sitting and who is sitting. The teacher and beatnik draw that any problem they face in their lives will be solved with money. During the fencing lesson, Rich talks to two of his classmates, but they were more interested in increasing their father's and Richie's money. It was surprising because they were more interested in the money than in enjoying their childhood and playing. They came to play with him on the weekends, but Reynolds and the Soros were sorry because they could not come because they would be busy with the family's work. This spoiled child was shouting at the internet because he brought him cappuccino instead of coffee, and Richie did not like the behavior that this child did. He attacks the child and his buttocks are pouring the drink onto his clothes, and while Richie was leaving, he learns that his Latin language lesson has been postponed, so he will have time to do any other activity, and Richie asks Harper to take him to the factory. United because he wants to play baseball with the children, and Harper was refusing and was afraid for him. But Richie is happy and asks to play with them. But the children refuse to play with him because they see him as a spoiled child. Richie tells them, "I can beat any one of you." The girl Gloria tells him, "Get some money and bet if you are confident in yourself, Richie." He takes out money without hesitation, and they are shocked that he takes out a large package from his pocket and eggs all fly out. The money they had was to equal the bet that Richie made. The bet was that he could hit the ball, and Gloria was confident that she would be defeated. So she threw the ball at him. But Rich failed. But in his second attempt, Rich concentrated and managed. He hits her hard and flies off, and Harper is celebrating this victory, and Richie insists that the children come to his house. But they refuse and tell him, "You don't look like us, and you won't be able to play with us." Gloria orders this child to pay the money from the bet to Richie, because Richie is the one who won. But Richie refuses to take the money and gets very upset. He takes some of it and walks away. And then, at the end of the week, Richard's family is preparing themselves because they will travel and it will be closed. The Queen of England and the workers are removing the bags and gifts that Richard wants for the Queen of England. And the bodyguard, Ferguson, puts a small red box in the middle of the bag. And we know that this box contains a bomb. And Ferguson ordered him to drop the bomb because he wanted Richard's family to die and for him to obtain the family's wealth. Richard also intended to present to the Queen the device that detects any odor. Richie was sitting on the plane looking sad. Regina asked Harper why her son was sad. Harper told her that he tried to make friends but failed and said, "To her I suggest that Richie not travel with you and stay at the palace and enjoy his time better than Regina. She feels that this is a good idea and agrees and goes to Richie to tell him. As for Ferguson, he was happy that all of Richard's family got on the plane, but he did not know that Richie left the plane and returned home on the same day. Harper was able to convince the children who were into baseball that they would come to the palace to make up for Richie, and they would not be upset. The children were alarmed by the size of the palace, and Richie was very happy with their presence and had mercy on them. He would take them to the palace and take them to the McDonald's that was in his house. After they sat at Richie's agency, he would take them to the amusement park and games he had, and the children were extremely happy. And relaxation, and then they ride the beach buggy. And Harper was walking with Diana, Gloria's mother, and the children were going to mess up, so he ran away, hugging Diana by mistake, and Richie was still enjoying his time with the children, and Beef was sitting under the tree. Gloria and the rest of the children were riding the jet ski in the lake, and the games and adventures were still not finished. Richie takes them to the amusement park, which he received as a gift last New Year. They ride the train, and we continue and go to Lawrence, who was in his office and was imagining that Richard's family must have died by now, and they would fall into the ocean, thus the family's fortune. All of them will be transferred to Lawrence, because he is Richard's partner in all companies, and at the same time, Richard lets Regina go on the plane, and he will get chocolate and use the device that detects the smell to know the location of the chocolate. But the device knows Richard. This red box contains strange materials, and Richard does not understand what these materials are. And he asks Origi about them, and he believes that when they see that there are explosives inside them, Fritsch throws them from the window. But they do not reach far, and they are useful in landing on the plane. And because of what happened, the plane falls and the two of them are on the verge of death, along with Lawrence before. He didn't know about the news of Richard's family's death. He was sitting celebrating in Richard's office, and he thought that this was all his legacy, and we would go to Rich, who he bid farewell to his new friends, and then Harper was informed of the terrible news that his father's plane had disappeared. Fritchie ran to his satellite to find out where they were with the GPS, but after a long search, he does not know their whereabouts. As for Ferguson, he calls the office to Lawrence and tells him that there is a simple problem that occurred in the plan, which is that Richie was not on the plane, so he is the heir to the family's property, and Lawrence gets angry about this. But he says it is simple. I will get rid of the boy. This little boy is just as I got rid of his father and mother, and Richie sees the news of his father and mother's plane landing on television. It is said that there was no trace of the bodies of the victims, and Richie had a feeling that his father and mother were alive. Fortunately, Richie's feeling was correct, and the two were able to live, and they are now in the rescue boat, waiting for someone to come rescue them and Richard. He is trying to fix the device that he uses to communicate with his son so that Richie can know their location at sea. And Regina is waiting for Lawrence to be the one who put the bomb on the plane. And she tells him that you should have refused a long time ago. But Richard tells her that I have never rejected anyone before, and I had no intention of rejecting him. Richard and Regina are now worried about Richie because his life is in danger, and Lawrence announces that he is the new president of his company. Richard's first decision is to close the United factory, and Gloria is upset by this decision because her mother was working in the factory and called Richie and told him about this news. He is shocked, and they read the company, and he sues the manager Quaresma and tells him that I will take over the position of director until my father and mother come back to Lawrence. And he tells him that this work is tiring for you, except that you are still young and do not have enough experience, and legally you cannot manage the stocks in companies. Harper intervenes and tells him that I am the guardian of Richie now. I am taking his father's place until he returns, and therefore I want Rich to have full rights management. And the first decision Richie made was to return to the United factory to work, and Richie continued to attend all company meetings. Lawrence wanted to reject a few employees, but Rich prevented him from rejecting any employee because his father did not. Someone refuses, and after a few days, Gloria and her friends come to the company to thank Richie for staying in the opening of the factory. And when they fear for him, he is very happy when he sees them. And he works in his company to crush the chocolate that the company produces. He thinks what the chocolate needs, and in fact, he takes what they say and goes back to the ingredients of the chocolate. And Richie stays. He takes them with him every day to the company. Then he meets with the most important members of the company, and they all support Richie in his decisions. And this makes Lawrence fanatical and becomes Apple Ferguson after that, and he implements the alternative plan to eliminate Richie. But this time, take care and we will go to Richard and his wife, and it will be. The food they had ran out, and they lost hope that someone would come to their rescue. But suddenly they saw one of their bags in front of them. And then the police officers feared that the company and their home feared that Harper was the one who planted a bomb on Richard's plane, because they searched Harper's house and found bombs in his house. And of course, the truth is that Lawrence was the one who ordered Ferguson. He is accused of fleeing cold. And after what happened, he went to court. She wants Lawrence to be Richie's guardian and raises bail to release Harper and Lawrence. After he became the manager, fires some employees from the company, and Richie had nothing he could do and went looking for his father again. But there was no hope for Ferguson. The workers are afraid for him in his room because they will install surveillance cameras in the entire house to monitor Richie's movements and see where he is going and coming from. Ferguson also will never allow Richie to leave the palace, under the pretext that he is afraid that something will happen to him, like what happened to his father and mother. And Lawrence is the one who will run the company from today. And Richie is upset. When he sees cameras and guards all over the house, he feels like he is trapped in his house. Ferguson goes to inform Lawrence that everything is going as we plan, but Lawrence tells him that I still need to know where the family's basement is. And you are supposed to be the family's bodyguard, and you are supposed to know. So Herson told him this thing. The only one I don't know is that Al Kane is spying on them from his laboratory, and he overheard them using a device of his inventions. And he knows from their words that they framed Harvard to get rid of him, and they are also planning to kill him in prison. So he gets crazy and goes to inform Richie of this, and it becomes apparent to him that he invented a substance that melts iron. So the line will be that they are smuggling the substance. For Harvard to abandon the two poles, run away, and go, Richie gives the name and hands the officer a toothbrush and toothpaste, and the message is in Latin. The officer asks Richie about the toothpaste, then Richie tells him that Harper has sensitivity in his teeth, so he needs this toothpaste. But he already had this toothpaste inside him, the substance that melts the iron, and the officer agrees to hand it over to the fugitive. When Harper enters the bathroom, he takes out Richie's belongings, and at the same time he fears the criminal that Ferguson sold him to kill Harper. Harper puts the toothpaste on the brush, but they are surprised that he knew how to deal with him, and he lost consciousness, and then he lost consciousness and ran away, and Richie was waiting to take him. In the hug, I tell him that the police found the plane, but not I found my father and mother. And this means that they were able to escape from the explosion and alive. And Richie takes them and goes to Gloria's house. And Richie asks her to use her computer, while Richard finds a device in the bag will be able to help him in repairing the satellite communication device. But he tries it again and again, and it explodes. He puts Regina's earring in the place where the missing part of the device is. He is actually able to turn on the communication device and returns to Rich, who is using Gloria's computer and entering some codes to turn on his GPS. Here, but one of the security guards takes it. He realized that the GPS device had worked, so he decided to call Ferris to inform him, and at the same time, Lawrence and Ferguson. They went to Ken and tried to get any information from him about the location of Richard's family's basement, but he refused and told them, I have information that will put you in prison. They threaten that they will kill him if you don't talk. And Ken tells them, I don't know where the basement is, and if I knew, they wouldn't help me because it only opens with the voice of Richard or Regina. He interrupts a call from the security guard and they swallow what he's doing. Richie's GPS is about to show him where Richard is, but Ferguson arrives at Richie's room in the palace. The GPS stops working, and Fritchie does not know where his father and mother are, and he is very upset and asks for help. His friends are going to get to his room in the palace, while Ferguson understands that Richard and his wife are alive, and he calls Lawrence and tells them this important news. Florence is sending a plane to their place to save them and them. He thinks that Richie is the one who sold this plane, and at night, he and his friends arrive at the palace and make a plan to break into them. And they use games and call out complaints to the security guards. And Biff is unconscious. And Richie takes his friends to the laboratory, and Bella is tied up. And after they are freed, he tells him, I need to get to my room, and I want you to get distracted. Pay attention to the guards so no one can see me. Ken agrees and prepares an invention for this task, and brings a specific material. He puts it in the water tank in the fountain. The water in the garden produces a lot of foam. In fact, the guards have just been busy with the fountain. Richie's friends took advantage of the situation and turned off the surveillance cameras. Richie and Harper are going through the room, but Richie is surprised. When he finds the GPS, it informs him that his father is at home and is about to arrest Richard and Regina. And he tells him that your friends will also catch you now. And Richie is shocked when he sees his father and mother. And in fact, the security guard is arresting Richie's friends. And Lawrence tells Richard, "I have arrived at the place of your valuable treasure." Richard tells him, "Open the window, you will find him." Outside, when Anas opened, he saw the carved mountain, and it looked like a basement. The family is in the mountain, and he tells them that you will take me to the treasure place now, and Richie will stay with Ferguson. And if you help me, I promise you, this is not the case with any of you, so they will have to agree. And Ferguson was taking Harper, and the workers go to the laboratory to put them in this cage, and he presses a button and turns on the molecular regulator device. So Richie and his friends will die, and Kane does not remain silent and reads, and uses the adhesive substance, not his invention. And as soon as the guard touches it, it sticks in his place and does not move. But Ferguson takes care and avoids the substance, and looks for Kane to kill him, and Ken puts the substance down on this towel, and he puts it on Ferguson's face, and it sticks to me. And Ken wanted to free Richie, but he discovered that he also got stuck and accidentally stepped on the material. So he used the bee and let it prick Ferguson's butt. So he stepped on a button and burned Richie and his friends, and Richie takes the bag of inventions and moves to save his father and mother. At the same time, Lawrence reaches the secret of the family animal and passes by, opening the door while they hear the words and open the door using the tone of their voice. Lawrence tolerates and feels afraid, but does not find anything of value. And Richard tells him these are the things that we love and have affection for. It is great, and everything from these countries has specific memories. Lawrence is going crazy, and they ask, "Where do you put your money?" Richard told him, "My money is in my assets, real estate, and stocks." Lawrence, out of anger, passes the guard and kills them, but Richie arrives and prevents Florence from shooting at Richie, but he leaves. Richie was sprayed with a substance that protects against bullets, and Richard got rid of the guard and hit Lawrence and fell. He came out of the basement and locked it, but Lawrence was later leaving, and the family was running, but they reached a dead end, and Ferguson kept getting rid of the towel that was on his face and saw him from afar, so he used the laser sculpture device. To kill them, Lawrence also appears and tries to kill them, and Harper appears at the right time and attacks Ferguson, but they are unsuccessful in the attacks. Lawrence had attacked them, but fortunately the bullets had ended, and Fritchie hit him and he fell, and he too was in danger. And they found a father, and he came to them from another place. Ferguson takes control of the laser device and hits the statue with the laser. And because of that, Regina was about to fall. But Richard and Richie take her and Pio to the nearest safe place in the statue. And Ferguson is still trying to kill them, but Harper hits him in the brain and gets rid of him. And Lawrence was on top of the statue and trying to kill them again. But Harper was on the lookout and hit him. He stands on it and is sold from above and hangs in front of them while they hit him in the face. Thus, leaving Richard's family, I was able to triumph over him, and Rucci has become very companions who loved them and loved you, while playing bisbal in the fetus with the palace, Lawrence and Ferguson, who became workers of cleaning workers in the palace. And this because Richard does not like to reject anyone, Harper and Diana. They love some, and Ruisi celebrated with his companions. And here we have reached the end of the episode. You do not forget to trample, like, and help us.